thing. When I become a thankful person, several things happen. The first thing that happens is I think differently about me. I remember when I'm thankful that I'm not at the center, that I'm not the most important thing, that the world does not revolve around me. When I'm thankful, it breaks me from that self-centeredness for just a little bit. It's a good thing. Second thing that happens when I'm thankful, by the way, you need to join the choir. You have a beautiful voice. Have you ever thought about saying something to somebody and then you forgot and later you were, all right. The second thing about being thankful is when I stop thinking about myself and I think that I'm thankful, I begin to worship God. You know, I stop just talking about God and I stop just talking to God. When I'm thankful, I just start to worship. I just go, yeah, you know. You have somebody in your life that you love, you know, and sometimes you just have this feeling you just want to just tell them in indescribable ways how much you love them. When I find a heart of thanksgiving, I just want to worship. You know, every relationship has its ups and downs, even in your spiritual life. Don't feel guilty if you don't feel close to God every single day. It's just not going to happen. There is an ebb and flow to this deal. And just like there are human beings in your life that you love and you're close to, and then sometimes you're not as close to, it's like that in our relationship with God. But something that will help you feel closer to Him is to find a thankful heart. And if you're here today and you felt distanced from Him, if you're here today and you felt a coldness inside, I invite you to look with me at some of the things that God has made and be thankful. And see if it doesn't cause you to appreciate Him, to love Him more, and consequently then to feel closer to Him. And then the last thing being thankful does, it helps me be nicer to you. Now, I didn't think I was treating you bad, really. Jeff, have I been treating you bad? No. I've been trying to be good to you. But when I'm thankful, grace rises to the top. God's love kind of rises to the top, and I'm a little bit more careful about what comes out of my mouth. I wait before I call my children in to straighten them out. When I'm thankful to God, a spirit of grace captures my heart, and I am better to you. And so I want you to see that being thankful is a good thing. It's a very spiritual thing. You know, there are a lot of things that we can learn that will fill our brain with good and important knowledge, but when you are thankful, your heart is filled with this indescribable sense that God is wonderful and awesome. You know, it makes you glad to be alive. It makes you glad to be in relationship with Him. And when we appreciate God, we start to appreciate all sorts of things. A few weeks ago, I told a story, and I'm going to tell it again because some of you weren't here, and some of you have forgotten it, and some of you, I just want you to hear it so you'll remember this story. This has become one of my favorite stories. It's about how people usually live on autopilot. They're not noticing the greatness and glory of God because they're all focused on themselves. And it's the story of the tour bus. Remember, and the tour bus is driving through Yosemite, one of my most beautiful places that God has made. And all the shades on the bus are down, and all the people on the bus are all arguing and bickering. They're doing the human things. Oh, I'm better than them. Oh, they think they're so important. Oh, if we just made more money, we'd this. I don't know why they think they should be president of that group. I should be president of that group. You know, I wish that people would have their dogs stay off of my yard. And boop, 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 boop. And we go through our entire lives bickering and frustrated with all of the human drama, when right outside our windows, if we would just lift the shades, there is this great glorious, majestic world, as the scripture says, speaking to us, declaring to us about God's grace, about God's gifts, about God's love. And you know what? This message is not just for you who believe. If you're here today and you don't believe, if you're not sure if you believe, I want you to listen up. And for that matter, all of us have those moments of doubt. If we can begin to look and see what God has already put into the world, these wonderful things are calling to us of his glory, of his love. One of my favorite scriptures is in Romans 1, and it's kind of in a difficult spot, but I'll read you my favorite part of it. It's Romans 1, 19 and 20. And Paul is writing to people that don't get it. He's writing to people who have been intentionally evil. And this is what he says. He says, what may be known about God is plain to those people. God has made it plain to them. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men and women are without excuse. You know what that tells me? You don't need a church and you don't need a preacher. Every single thing that God has made is calling to us, describing to us who he is. It means that the pygmy in Africa, with no church and no missionary, looks at the stars, looks at the moon, and he is without excuse. He is held accountable by what God has put into the world. We have to say, even with limited knowledge, there is a God, he's bigger than me, and I bend the knee. These are some of the things that I see in the world that cause me to say, God is wonderful and marvelous. We'll start with something very simple. Rocks. Where's Monument Valley at? Utah, Nevada? You know, there's some amazing rocks that God has put into the world. Grand Canyon. Absolutely amazing things that you can look at and just stand in awe. And when you see something and you stand in awe, it begins to help your heart understand worship. You know, one of the things I love about Missouri is it's got rocks, okay? By the way, those of you that weren't clear, it's not Missouri, it's Missouri, okay? I lived in Oklahoma for a while. Anybody lived in Oklahoma before? It's a great state. If you live out in the west, there's no trees, and they're kind of bent over like this, the few that there are, okay? And there's a lot of sand and orange ponds, and this is great if you're from there, but I wasn't from there, and you know, I was missing rocks. I wanted to drive down the highway and see rocks, okay? Now, you think this is silly? Don't leave. Let's go on the highway, and we're driving towards Columbia, and you get along to the Blackwater Creek or river, and there are these big, massive cliffs, and you go, whoa, that's amazing. Rocks talk to us about our Creator. Rocks give us a feeling. We like rocks so much, we find them and put them in our yards. How many of you have special rocks in your yard? You know what I'm talking about. How many of you stole them from construction sites without asking? Now, I want to tell you something. We didn't know God was doing this. Unbeknownst to us, right out here, north of our building, he's been speaking to us. There were giant rocks. And this past week, you may not know it, but you are putting in a sewer from the street out to the missions building. They have a big track hoe, and it's digging the trench, and it is pulling up ginormous rocks, gargantuan, huge rocks. They're all in a line out here. And yesterday I walked on them. Some of them are as big as Volkswagens. They are huge. And I'm going, ooh, I want one of these in my yard, right? You don't always see them, but right beneath the surface is something that God wants to tell you about his greatness, okay? Just look at a rock formation sometime and ask God, how did you do this? How do you make it wonderful? Someday I'm going to tell you about the dinosaur bones we found out here when they were widening the street. That's for another day. But they're marvelous, marvelous things that God says to us just through simple things like rocks. And then we have oceans. I was a very fortunate young man. I spent my junior and senior high years in San Jose, California, which was about 20 miles from the beach. And we drove every opportunity we could and spent Saturday at the beach and boardwalk at Santa Cruz. It was a wonderful place to be a kid. And you know, there's that just wonderful noise of waves coming in and going out. This particular picture is from Cocoa Beach, one of my favorite places, of course, on the other side of the country. And I love to go there because the waves are great. And you get out about this deep, and they pick you up, and they set you down, and they pick you up, and they set you down. It's like free entertainment, okay? I don't care what they charged you for parking there on the pier. It's just free entertainment, and we stay there all day long. A few years ago, we were out there, and, you know, we did Disney World and Sea World and Universal Studios. And then we went to the beach, and we have one day left. We said to the kids, okay, guys, Universal, Disney World, Sea World, you know what they said? Tomorrow, let's come back to the beach. And I said, my kids are going to be okay after all. The immensity of the ocean, the cadence of the waves, the power of the waves are telling us that God is great, that he is wonderful, beyond our imagination. Just think, if we had the chance to create a world and we had to start from scratch, would we come up with anything that even begins to scratch the surface of the glorious and wonderful things that God has placed in the world for us? Lightning. How many of you remember as a kid your first lightning storm? I do. My mom said, get out there, boy. We lived at 9601 Walnut. You could hear the bells from Colonial Presbyterian Church when I was a kid, but not this night, because there was a big, big storm, and it was north. And we stood in the front yard, and we looked up to the north, and you could see the dark clouds and the thunder and lightning, and I was terrified. And my mama said, it's okay, son. It's just the angels bowling, right? Little lies you tell your kids, you know, to try to help them. The amazing thing about thunder and lightning, a good one will still scare a grown man. You know, you hear the thunder and lightning storm. I don't know about you. I want to go outside and look at it because it calls to me. It says, I'm big. I'm powerful in ways that you can only begin to understand. And you may be kind of lulled to sleep by a quiet storm, and then there's one of those ones that hits about 2 doors down, and it shakes the whole house. You go, amazing. What God has done in creation can cause grown men and women to cry out in prayer. Niagara Falls. I visited Niagara Falls when I was 3 years old. One of my earliest memories. In fact, that's me on the back of the boat. Had the little yellow parka, you know, the little yellow raincoat, and I can remember even back then going, man, this is cool. And anytime I'm around water, water's amazing. That's why people love fountains. Why are there fountains on the plaza? I mean, fountains are wonderful. The noise of water and the splash of water. What a simple but glorious and wonderful thing God has given us in water. And to see what water can do in carving a channel. You ever been to Johnson Shut-ins? It's a state park in Missouri. Amazing things that God has done through the creative power of water. A few months ago, my wife was on vacation, or not on vacation. Don't tell her I said that. She was working, and she flew into Buffalo, New York, and she had a few hours. Actually didn't have to be at work till the next day, so she goes for a drive. And she calls me up, and we don't have a very good connection. Usually she calls me and says, okay, I'm arrived, and I'm at the hotel. And sometimes when people are in big buildings, you have to say, I can't hear you, get closer to the window. And I say, man, this is a bad connection, get closer to the window. And you know what she says? It's not a bad connection. I'm at Niagara Falls. So she had a great time witnessing that, and I was here looking at rocks, which is not a bad thing either. Fall. How many of you have a red maple tree in your yard? If you're here today and you have doubts about God, look at a maple tree when it is turning colors and ask yourself, does that just happen by chance? Did that just happen by accident? Or isn't there a designer who paints the landscape with glory that causes a human being to say, oh, it's amazing. Oh, it's incredible. God, you're dynamic and beyond my understanding. I've always loved the fall. My dad says, why? Everything's dying. But you know, there's this wonderful moment, this few weeks when all of nature's glory is on display, and God is speaking to us about his creativity and about his greatness. Mountains. Anybody have a favorite mountain? No? Andrew? Long's Peak? Where's that? In Rocky Mountain in Estes Park. Okay. Anybody here from Kansas? No offense. Okay. But you're driving across Kansas, right? And you're drinking a lot of coffee. And you love the corn growers, but right now you're tired of them. And you know that pretty soon, and it may actually be in Colorado when this happens, but pretty soon you're going to see these things. And if you have kids and it's their first trip, you make sure they're awake and you make sure they're attentive. And then you begin to point it out to them. You say, look, look. That's an important word when you think about Thanksgiving. Look, see what's there. Look at this. And at first, you can't really tell if there's anything there. And then you see these shapes, and you wonder if they're clouds. And then finally, you get far enough in, and you know they're the mountains. And they speak to you this glorious message that in the midst of things that are quiet and flat and cornfields, God has done some majestic and wonderful things. People love going to the mountains because you just look and see the greatness and glory of God. Trees. One of my favorite places in the world is Henry Cowell Redwood State Park in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I used to go there all the time when I was a teenager. And you know, to look at a tree that's 200 years old, what does that mean? What is it like? How many people have lived and died? And look at what God has done, this giant, massive thing, a whole forest of them. Yesterday I was at Home Depot. Trees were 50% off. I came home with 17 trees. I had to call my wife. I said, when you come home, okay, the truck, none of those trees are for us, so don't get excited. Redbuds, $4.50. Cleveland pears, $6. Got 3 big Japanese maples for $32. Big. They're out here somewhere. We're going to plant them out here. Absolutely thrilling. How many of you have an oak tree? Little tiny annoying acorns. But God takes one of those and launches this thing, and it grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and they are absolutely incredible and amazing. If your prayer life is lagging, go take 20 minutes and find a place where you can sit outside with the trees and the birds and the wind and say, God, help me see your greatness, because it is all over the place. in the trees. Stars. Anybody know what constellation that is? Thank you. So Orion the Hunter, yeah. When I was 13, I was in the astronomy club. And I don't know why, but there's only one thing that I remembered from the astronomy club. This is Orion. And since I was 13 till now, every year, I pick him out. He is a winter constellation. You can only see him in the winter time. You know, that's kind of like how God is. You don't always see him, but he's always there. And year after year, this constellation crawls across the sky, starting in the fall, through the winter, and then as spring approaches, dips down over the horizon. And I have had numerous talks over the years with that constellation, with the God who made it, about my life and the changing of times and seasons. You know, the life just keeps marching on, and my life is changing so much. And here's this thing that God has set in the sky, and I see it year after year after year, and I think, God, you're so big. I'm so small. What does my life mean? Can you tell me? Can you help me understand you? Can you help me feel you? The heavens declare the glory of God. All of these things are speaking to us of God's greatness and his majesty. You know, we'll leave this topic for another day. Let's go back to the star one. There is a movie that I'm sure many of you have seen, Signs, with Mel Gibson. It has some interesting themes that I'm not going to get into today, but one of the things that I really enjoyed in this movie is that he's a clergyman who's given up on God. A lot of Christians have times in their life when they want to give up on God. He gave up because his wife was killed. And right before his wife died, she left him with a word. And the word was, see, to see, see. And he spends the whole movie dealing with this drama, doubting whether God is active in the world, doubting whether anything matters, angry at God, doesn't want to pray. But there's this message all the time. See, look, see what's there. And finally, at the end of the show, he's figured it out. God is present. God is active. God can make a difference in our lives if we just see his goodness at work. And I just love the last scene of this movie where this guy who's been so negative and full of doubt all through the show comes out of the closet where he's been dressing, and he turns around and he is wearing again the priestly garb, you know, the fatherly collar. And what he's saying is I believe, I see. And today I want to invite you to look for a heart of thanksgiving. If you've been on the bus and been thinking about all the things that are distracting, let the shades up and look out the window. See the good that God has placed in the world, because all of these things and many, many, many more, they are crying out to you day and night about who God is and what he is like. Their voices go out in every language to every place, saying things like, I am God. I am great, and I love you. We're going to close today with a